You know, about a year and a half ago, I vividly remember that one of my criticisms for the story was that we don't really spend all that much time with any of the characters. The story was so plot-centric that none of them could breathe and really reflect on what's going on. I specifically remember saying that I wouldn't mind if we got a simple chapter where we just sit down and talk with them. Learn more about them, learn about the world around us, and see people interact with each other. Chapter 6 is that chapter. To quickly recap the story, which I replayed when recording footage for this video. We're coming from the high of Chapter 5. A new threat is being introduced to us, in the form of Starless. Halpha's leaders gather to discuss the matter before having to answer a distress signal in Resol Forest. There, we finally get to witness some Starless action, and Dozer gets seriously injured when protecting Aina. The theme that plays during this story quest is really neat. You might recognize it from a future quest. It sounds like a perfect fit for battling the unknown, and despite the Starless being a clear inspiration for the doll's enemy design, they have new moves and apply physical status ailments, neither of which dolls could replicate. This by itself makes them mechanically and narratively a greater threat, even if in actuality we just mow them down like grass in combat sectors. The action quickly fades and the story takes a breather for a decent chunk of the chapter. Aina becomes a new recruit instructor. This makes her to grow further, allowing her to leave her comfort zone and try to prove herself on her own. At the same time, a new research group is formed led by Glenn, which Menon quickly joins. The player character, which I will refer to as 909 from this point on, gains the title of a guardian, and is the new symbol of Halpha's might, one that is meant to inspire arcs. Us longtime PSO2 players know what the title of guardian implies, but the NGS characters seem to not know of its history yet. And thus the main trio that fell Dark Falls is separated. Aina prepares for her job as an instructor. Menon is seen helping people out while also having to deal with some lingering guilt. And 909 is just helping around Halpha, uncovering details about the world which we could previously only speculate about. Cleaning out some mobs in combat sectors, and helping the Les Seal Scout team in their raid, while also occasionally bonking a Starless Dark Falls on the head, is contextualized as just things that 909 does on their own. The fact that Dark Falls is just an enemy class in this game, rather than a major story character, doesn't sit well with everyone. I personally don't really have an issue with it. The story moves at such a snail's pace that tying them to the story would mean less gameplay content. And I'd rather have more content to play than less of it. So needless to say, I don't really have a problem with Dark Falls' Solus and Dalian lacking story presence. The game loosely implies that these fights are just an everyday occurrence for arcs now. We still don't know what the Starless are, where they came from, who commands them, and why they're waging war against humanity. And I assume all of these questions will remain a mystery for a while, since on top of the Starless, we still have a lot of other issues to take care of. Halpha's arcs are still technologically unequipped to do anything but defend themselves from the Starless invasion. Apparently there is a space station in the orbit of the planet, presumably it's the new zone we'll get to play in June, and it'll likely be what Chapter 7 will revolve around. But let's get back on track. Menon's story in this chapter ultimately leads to her using Overboost to the point of exhaustion. She believes that, if she doesn't use it, people will think poorly of her, and even if they didn't, she thinks everyone hates her for being a Les Sealant all along, and wouldn't mind disappearing to make life easier for everyone. This is where everyone around Halpha gets together, and begins searching for Limina Cygnae, which is apparently so powerful, it can cure Menon's photon deficiency. After waking up, Menon confesses how she has felt this whole time, and realizes how silly she was, once Aina and 909 show her that everyone worked together to cure her. People truly do care about her, and after she realizes that, she apologizes for her recklessness, and changes her outlook on the future. At first, I remember not really liking this story beat. I felt like Menon should have overcome her guilt in Chapter 5, and it felt like she was derailing the story. Not to mention her collapsing happened off-screen, and I felt it would be better if it was shown on screen. This is where the release timing of the story kinda doesn't do it any favor. It was established pretty early that the trio is splitting up, but by the time we got to this part it's been 4 months, and I already forgot that detail. So when replaying the story for this video, I realized how silly that criticism is. And what also changed is that, since that story part originally came out, and me replaying the whole chapter for this video, a friend of mine made an attempt on their life. Luckily it failed, but upon replaying the chapter, I noticed some concerning parallels which made me realize this isn't sloppy writing, this is real. And at this point I would like to stop and tell you, if you need to hear this, uninstalling your life isn't a solution. Please talk to people who you consider close, or a Sudoku prevention hotline, about what you're going through, and seek emotional support. Being self-destructive like that only serves to hurt people closest to you, and is never the correct solution to your problems. So, in retrospect I found Menon was more relatable in her struggles than in my initial playthrough, and made me appreciate her more as a character than before. I know this won't resonate with everyone, but it did with me, and I wish some people who weren't fans of this part of the story originally could replay it with a more open mind. Ina's story in this chapter has her learning how to become a good teacher. She seeks guidance from various people on Halpha, but is a bit overwhelmed with the task and fears for the worst. This is where the second story mission comes into play, where 909 has to rescue her and her group from a starless ambush. The music in this part slaps some major ass, listen to this. This second theme will also be important later. Ina's experience clearly shows in these cutscenes, and is such a stark contrast to earlier chapters. In the first chapter, she couldn't even face a larger dolls unit without freezing up and having PTSD. In the fourth chapter, she still had some issues with it but could quickly snap back to reality. And now, she doesn't even flinch and makes correct decisions in the heat of the moment that end up saving the day. Ina is by far my favorite character in this game. Not only is she the most developed character of them all, but the story also just gives her a lot of really cool moments like these. Her struggle of not knowing how to teach her trainees was also very relatable to me. As some of you may know, I am the author of the Tector Guide for both PSO2 and NGS. One of the major issues when writing them was figuring out how I'd convey my knowledge to readers. I don't want to just say, do this, do that, and you're good, because then whoever reads it will not really understand why they're doing this and that. Instead, my guides focus on explaining each tool at Tector's disposal, what its strengths and shortcomings are, and how things interact with each other. This isn't something you can gather from a DPS spreadsheet alone, and both of my guides took a tremendous amount of effort, research, and rewrites to become what they are today. I liked Ina before, but this chapter has made me like her even more. Then there is also Dozer. While a minor character, he received some love in this chapter. In the JP script, his name is Bruder, which is the German word for brother. And I think the devs chose that name because he's supposed to be a bigger brother to our trio of protagonists. The side story where he talks about his and 909's origins as Meteorns was very fascinating to me. They put a lot of character and world building into that shortcut scene, and I can't wait to see what else the devs have in store for our Robo Bro though. Now, let's talk about Dark Falls Dalian again. It's heavily implied in the marketing material that Dalian is an evolved form of Solus. Similarly to how Dark Falls evolved into Dark Falls Aegis. It's also a pretty cool detail that, despite coming from some different dimension, the starless Dark Falls always choose spawn points hidden from Central Cannon's line of fire. It shows that they are indeed scouting the planet, and searching for weak spots to exploit. Dalian itself has a pretty kick-ass theme that ties the two story missions together in a very nice way. The first phase sounds like we're being ambushed, and the motif plays from the first story mission, where we indeed were ambushed. On the other hand, the canon phase takes a more cheerful vibe as to say that, we can do this. Meanwhile, a reprise from the second chapter of the story plays, where arcs overcame their hopeless situation. No matter how hard he tries, he's not crushing this planet while we are around. So, overall I was pretty satisfied with this chapter. I know some people wanted more out of it, but I'm perfectly happy with having a filler chapter that focuses on characters more than the overall narrative. Not every chapter has to be this way, of course, and I hope Chapter 7 will have more action again. I'm really looking forward to June, and I can't wait to see in what direction the story will develop. The new urban zone might have some really big revelations, or pose even bigger questions to us. Overall, the writing continues with the quality of the 5th chapter, bringing us a story that involves most characters, rather than just region-specific ones like in the first 4 chapters. The overarching plot was sidelined a little bit, but that's okay, it's the first chapter of version 2 after all. And it was by far the biggest chapter we've gotten so far, so that's another plus. But that was my Chapter 6 ramble. As I mentioned in my community post, I'll be adding music commentary and story discussion videos like these, so I hope you found them entertaining. The reception for my latest melody video was very warm, so I plan to keep that video series in a music video format. I'm still trying to figure out how to do story-related content on my channel, since I really do like and care about the story. I want to share my passion with you guys, but talking about story implications in a dedicated music analysis video isn't exactly working out. In that regard, I really hope for your feedback. As always, huge shout out to my fellow wand lovers who are supporting my channel. I'll see everyone in the next video. Take care!